The company that makes the Gripen has told CTV News that 10,000 manufacturing and research jobs could land in Canada if Ottawa adds the Swedish fighter jet to its military.
Swedish defense firm Saab wants Canada to buy and build its fighter jets. The firm is pitching a partnership with Bombardier and promising to create up to 10,000 jobs along with it.
Fleet.
In Canada, to do their own upgrades, to build parts of it, to do final assembly and tests. We, as Saab, we are prepared to do that technology transfer to Canada and support that build-up.
A single decision in Europe has set off a chain reaction that now stretches across the Atlantic, sending quiet shockwaves through defense ministries, industrial boardrooms, and alliance headquarters. What began as a routine discussion about fighter jet production has evolved into a strategic crossroads for North America. At the center of it all stands Canada, caught between long-standing commitments and an unexpected alternative that is forcing policymakers to reassess assumptions once considered settled. The implications reach far beyond aircraft procurement. They touch alliance politics, sovereign control, industrial leverage, and the internal balance of influence inside NATO. When Saab AB signaled that production of the JAS-39 Gripen E could expand beyond Sweden and Brazil, most analysts viewed the idea as incremental. Brazil, through Embraer, already serves as a co-production partner for its own Air Force, a model widely seen as the ceiling for international collaboration. Sweden would retain primary authority. Brazil would anchor South American manufacturing. Meanwhile, the global fighter market would continue revolving around dominant American programs, particularly the Lockheed Martin F-35 Lightning II. That expectation quickly unraveled. Discussions began to center on a far more ambitious framework. Canada would not simply buy aircraft. It could assemble them, integrate subsystems, manage sustainment, and potentially function as a production hub serving multiple nations. That distinction transforms the debate. Fighter jet manufacturing is not only about airframes and engines. It determines who controls software updates, mission data files, maintenance pipelines, and supply chains that endure for decades. Industrial geography translates into political leverage, and long-term sustainment contracts can anchor influence for a generation. The contrast between the Gripen E and the F-35 reflects two distinct philosophies. The F-35 was conceived as a fifth-generation stealth platform built around advanced sensor fusion and a centralized digital logistics ecosystem tied to American-managed networks. Its structure binds operators into a deeply integrated system spanning allied air forces. Advocates argue this ensures seamless interoperability and collective strength. Critics counter that it embeds enduring technical dependence on U.S. infrastructure. The Gripen E takes a different approach. Designed for efficiency and adaptability, it emphasizes lower operating costs and sovereign control over upgrades and weapons integration. Its ability to operate from shorter runways and even reinforced highways reflects Sweden's Cold War doctrine of dispersal and survivability. Smaller maintenance crews, rapid turnaround times, and comparatively reduced lifecycle costs appeal to mid-sized nations balancing capability with fiscal restraint. Equipped with advanced AESA radar, modern electronic warfare systems, and network-enabled combat functionality, the aircraft remains competitive in contested environments while maintaining lower operational overhead. For Canada, those differences intersect directly with geography and budget realities. The Royal Canadian Air Force must patrol immense northern expanses, including Arctic regions where infrastructure is sparse and distances are extreme. Flexibility matters. Cost predictability matters. Sovereign upgrade pathways matter. At the same time, interoperability with the United States through NORAD carries decisive strategic weight. In 2022, Ottawa selected the F-35, committing to 88 aircraft at an initial estimate of 19 billion Canadian dollars. By mid-2025, projected acquisition costs had climbed to 27.7 billion. When infrastructure, sustainment, and support systems were included, estimates approached 33 billion. What began as a 19 billion procurement had expanded dramatically, intensifying scrutiny just as Saab's proposal introduced an alternative vision for Canada's role in the future fighter landscape. The extended delivery schedule means Canada would continue flying its aging CF-18 fleet well into the next decade, maintaining aircraft that were never designed to bridge such a prolonged transition. While modernization programs have kept them viable, the reality is unavoidable. Ottawa would be waiting for a next-generation fleet that is still undergoing software refinement and capability upgrades. Beyond the visible concerns of cost overruns and timeline pressures lies a deeper structural question embedded within the architecture of the Lockheed Martin F-35 program itself. The aircraft operates inside a centralized digital ecosystem, managed through US-based networks that oversee maintenance diagnostics, software baselines, mission data files, and global sustainment coordination. Participation delivers extraordinary capability and high-level interoperability across allied air forces. At the same time, it binds operators into a tightly integrated framework that limits independent modification and upgrade pathways. For governments that prioritize sovereign control over defense data and long-term technological autonomy, that reality carries strategic weight. Political tension added further scrutiny. In March 2025, Prime Minister Mark Carney ordered a formal review of Canada's F-35 procurement amid escalating trade friction with the United States under President Donald Trump. At that point, Canada had formally committed to 16 aircraft, with 72 remaining under the broader agreement. The review stopped short of cancellation, yet it reopened a debate many believed concluded years earlier. Sweden responded quickly. Saab AB reintroduced its Gripen E proposal, this time structured around domestic assembly in partnership with Bombardier Inc. The offer was designed not merely as an alternative aircraft, but as an industrial strategy. Saab outlined projections of up to 10,000 high-quality Canadian jobs, extensive technology transfer, and the establishment of long-term maintenance and upgrade capabilities on Canadian soil. Chief Executive Mikael Johansson confirmed discussions with Ottawa and Bombardier regarding local assembly lines. Industry Minister Melanie Joly described the proposal as compelling, particularly as concerns mounted that anticipated industrial offsets tied to the F-35 had not fully materialized. The concept was not theoretical. Saab and Bombardier had previously collaborated on the GlobalEye airborne early warning platform, with airframe assembly conducted in Canada before advanced sensor integration in Sweden. That precedent demonstrated that transatlantic production chains could operate efficiently, laying groundwork for a deeper partnership. Strategic demand soon intensified the equation. In October 2025, Sweden and Ukraine signed a letter of intent that could see Kyiv acquire between 100 and 150 Gripen E fighters. Swedish Defense Minister Pål Jonson acknowledged that such an order would exceed Sweden's current production capacity. Scaling output would require an additional industrial partner. Canada, with its established aerospace workforce and the world's largest Ukrainian diaspora outside Ukraine, emerged as a logical candidate. A Canadian production line could simultaneously serve domestic requirements and contribute to Ukraine's air defense reconstruction, tying Canadian industry directly to European security architecture. Washington's response was immediate. As speculation mounted, U.S. Ambassador to Canada Pete Hoekstra publicly cautioned that any decision not to complete the full 88 aircraft F-35 purchase would carry implications for NORAD. Established in 1957, North American Aerospace Defense Command integrates American and Canadian air defense operations, enabling seamless cross-border patrols and shared early warning systems. Hoekstra suggested that reducing Canada's F-35 commitment could compel the United States to reassess its own responsibilities within the continental defense structure. He further argued that the Gripen would offer inferior interoperability compared with the F-35's deeply integrated systems. Those remarks ignited debate in Ottawa. Vincent Rigby, former National Security and Intelligence Advisor to Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, characterized the comments as political signaling rather than formal Pentagon doctrine. Observers noted that public references linking procurement decisions to continental defense blurred the line between alliance coordination and strategic leverage. The conversation was no longer solely about aircraft performance. It had become a broader negotiation over autonomy, influence, and the distribution of industrial power within the Western alliance system. Public sentiment evolved alongside official deliberations. A December 2025 survey conducted by Ecos Politics indicated that 72% of Canadians supported introducing the Gripen into the Royal Canadian Air Force, either entirely or within a mixed fleet structure. Only 13% favored proceeding with the F-35 exactly as planned. While polling does not determine defense policy, it shapes the political environment in which leaders operate. International patterns reinforced the perception that procurement diversification was gaining traction among middle powers. Brazil operates the Gripen E through its partnership with Saab and Embraer. Colombia ordered 17 aircraft, expanding the platform's footprint in Latin America. Hungary and the Czech Republic have explored reducing exclusive reliance on American systems. In Denmark, debate intensified after Parliamentary Defense Committee Chair Rasmus Jarlov publicly reconsidered aspects of Copenhagen's F-35 acquisition. Collectively, these developments suggest a broader recalibration underway. Middle powers are increasingly balancing alliance integration with industrial sovereignty. Should Canada evolve into a multi-nation Gripen production hub, the consequences would extend well beyond its own procurement ledger. Distributed assembly could reduce bottlenecks concentrated in a single manufacturing base, accelerating deliveries for partner nations. Economies of scale across a broader customer network could drive lifecycle costs downward. Shared production lines would also create domestic economic incentives that anchor political commitment, embedding defense spending more directly into national industry. What began as a procurement review has grown into a defining test of how Western alliances distribute capability, control, and influence in an era of shifting power dynamics. A distributed production model carries implications that extend far beyond factory floors. It offers participating nations greater authority over software updates, weapons integration, and long-term upgrade cycles, an appeal that resonates with air forces cautious about centralized digital ecosystems. In an era when data control increasingly defines military sovereignty, the ability to modify and sustain advanced aircraft domestically becomes more than a technical advantage. It becomes a strategic statement. For countries weighing procurement decisions, autonomy over mission systems and maintenance pathways can prove as influential as radar range or payload capacity. From an industrial standpoint, fighter programs operate on timelines measured in decades. The nation that builds and services these aircraft shapes avionics development, propulsion expertise, software architecture, and export relationships for a generation. Canada's aerospace sector already possesses advanced manufacturing depth, experienced engineers, and long-standing integration within NATO frameworks. Transitioning into a central node for production of the Saab AB Gripen E would anchor high-value supply chains domestically, reinforce technological independence, and potentially position Canada as a significant exporter within allied defense markets. For Sweden, expanded production capacity strengthens resilience and accelerates delivery flexibility. For NATO, diversification reduces concentration risk within a single supply chain. For the United States, such diversification would modestly dilute the centralized industrial influence that has accompanied the dominance of the Lockheed Martin F-35 program. None of these dynamics unfold in isolation. Deliveries of Canada's initial 16 F-35 aircraft remain scheduled for 2028. Conversations with Saab continue in parallel. Diplomats on both sides maintain disciplined public messaging, while negotiations over offsets, production timelines, and alliance considerations proceed behind closed doors. Each pathway preserves distinct strengths and introduces measurable trade-offs. Completing the full F-35 acquisition guarantees maximum interoperability with U.S. forces and reinforces Canada's deeply integrated role within the North American Aerospace Defense Command. It also locks Ottawa into higher projected expenditures and long-term reliance on U.S.-managed logistics networks. Shifting toward the Gripen E could generate thousands of domestic jobs, expand technology transfer, and enhance operational autonomy, while potentially introducing friction inside alliance structures increasingly standardized around the F-35 ecosystem. The debate now transcends aircraft performance metrics. It centers on how Canada defines strategic independence within an alliance anchored by a superpower neighbor. Defense procurement merges economics, sovereignty, and geopolitics in a way few other policy choices can. As 2026 unfolds, Canada stands at a decisive intersection shaped by rising program costs, industrial opportunity, diplomatic signaling, and public sentiment. A contract initially presented at 19 billion Canadian dollars now approaches 33 billion when infrastructure and sustainment are included. A major software modernization package remains billions over budget and years behind schedule. A competing proposal promises up to 10,000 domestic jobs and shared production capacity serving multiple nations. Washington signals concern about interoperability implications for continental defense. Public polling reflects a growing appetite for diversification. Other middle powers observe carefully, aware that Canada's decision could signal whether deeper integration with the United States remains the default trajectory, or whether alternative industrial alignments can thrive within NATO without undermining alliance cohesion. No outcome avoids compromise. No alliance operates without mutual obligation. Canada must balance cost escalation against operational compatibility, industrial autonomy against diplomatic strain, and long-term sovereignty against immediate security assurances. When national defense priorities pull in one direction and the desire for expanded independence pulls in another, determining which principle should anchor policy becomes unavoidable. At the same time, broader economic tensions add another layer of complexity. Canada's finance minister recently suggested that expectations of a complete rollback of U.S. tariffs may be unrealistic, indicating that a baseline levy could become a structural cost of maintaining access to the American market. The statement marked a noticeable shift in tone from Ottawa, acknowledging that cross-border economic relations are evolving and that integration may increasingly come with permanent conditions rather than temporary disputes. In that environment, decisions about defense production, industrial alignment, and alliance posture take on heightened significance. The direction Ottawa chooses will not only define its future fighter fleet, it may also signal how Canada intends to navigate a changing balance between partnership and independence in North America. Finance Minister François-Philippe Champagne spoke in Ottawa just hours after President Donald Trump delivered his State of the Union address, outlining an economic doctrine that could redefine North American trade. In that speech, the president presented an ambitious vision in which tariffs would gradually replace income taxes as a primary pillar of federal revenue. The message carried implications far beyond Capitol Hill. It framed tariffs not as temporary leverage in a tactical negotiation, but as a structural feature of American economic strategy. For allies and trading partners alike, that distinction matters. A bargaining chip can be removed. A structural pillar is far more difficult to dismantle. When asked whether the president's remarks diminished Canada's hopes of seeing duties lifted, Champagne responded with unusual directness. He argued that the global business community now recognizes that the current American administration views access to its domestic market as something that carries a cost. In his assessment, every country pays a price to sell into the United States, and Canada, comparatively, is paying the lowest among them. The statement reflected a pragmatic recalibration in Ottawa's tone. Rather than framing tariffs as an aberration to be corrected, Champagne suggested they may represent an enduring feature of cross-border commerce under the current policy framework. His remarks echoed comments from U.S. Trade Representative Jameson Greer, who indicated that if Canada intends to maintain large-scale commercial engagement with the United States, it may need to accept a degree of elevated tariffs as part of broader negotiations over market access. Those discussions, he implied, could extend into politically sensitive sectors such as dairy, an area that has long generated friction between the two countries. The framing signaled that Washington increasingly sees tariffs not as isolated remedies aimed at particular industries, but as instruments intertwined with long-standing trade grievances and strategic economic priorities. The immediate trigger for this new chapter came from the judiciary. In a 6-3 ruling, the Supreme Court of the United States determined that the sweeping tariff measures enacted the previous April exceeded presidential authority and were therefore unlawful. The decision might have prompted a retreat. Instead, it produced a recalibration. President Trump invoked Section 122 of the Trade Act of 1974, a rarely used provision that grants the executive branch authority to impose tariffs of up to 15% for a period of 150 days without prior congressional approval. After that window closes, Congress must determine whether to extend or modify the action. Acting under that authority, the administration implemented a new 10% global tariff, which took effect Tuesday and replaced the broader measures struck down by the court. The maneuver underscored the administration's commitment to maintaining tariff pressure while navigating constitutional constraints. It also reinforced the perception that trade policy is becoming a central instrument of fiscal planning rather than a temporary negotiating tactic. For Canada, the implications are complex. Economic integration with the United States remains foundational. Yet the evolving policy landscape suggests that preferential access may increasingly come with embedded costs rather than periodic disputes. Champagne's remarks acknowledge that reality without escalating rhetoric, signaling that Ottawa is preparing for a prolonged adjustment rather than a swift resolution. As Washington doubles down on tariffs as both revenue source and negotiating leverage, allies are left to calculate how best to safeguard competitiveness while preserving strategic partnerships. The broader question now is not whether tariffs will define the relationship, but how permanently they will reshape it.